Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover a really fascinating historical mystery hidden out in the rugged American Southwest. We're going to explore a story of discovery that actually predates the famous American pioneers by decades. It's a story we pieced together from old Spanish records, modern archaeological journals, the whole shebang. So get ready because we're heading deep into the vast, unknown wilderness of what is now western Colorado and eastern Utah.
So, what do mythical bearded men, ancient ruins, and the Spanish Empire all have in common? I know, it sounds exactly like the plot of a crazy adventure novel, right? But believe it or not, these exact elements drove early Spanish expeditions straight into the completely uncharted Colorado Plateau. At the time, this whole region was just a vast, mysterious blank space on European maps. But the Spanish authorities down in New Mexico, they were absolutely desperate to fill it in. And they were driven by this wild mix of geopolitical anxiety, a massive need for resources, and, well, some truly bizarre local legends.
So here's our roadmap for the journey today. We'll start with the myths, money, and motivations. Then look at Juan Rivera's 1765 expeditions. After that, we'll cover the First Peoples Network, the Old Spanish Trail, and finally, the modern archaeological legacy.
All right, part 1, myths, money, and motivations. Let's see how the pressing needs of an 18th century empire set the perfect stage for discovery.
To really understand why the Spanish ventured into such harsh, unforgiving terrain, we got to look at the immense pressures on the Spanish Empire back in the mid-18th century. I mean, Spain was desperately broke from financing disputes with other European rivals, and they really needed to strengthen their grip on Mexico. Plus, they were terrified, and I mean terrified, of French and Russian explorers creeping into their territory from the north. So they absolutely needed to locate critical silver deposits to fund their empire. But here's where it gets weird. Alongside those practical matters, they were lured by legends of a land called Teguanayo. Local Native Americans had been reporting that this mysterious land far to the northwest was home to these strange, bearded, European-looking men. So the Spanish authorities in Santa Fe just had to know. Were these strange bearded men some lost civilization, or were they rival French or Russian operatives sneaking around?
Moving on to part 2, Juan Rivera's 1765 expeditions. Enter Juan Antonio María de Rivera, the guy literally tasked by the governor of New Mexico to venture into the unknown and solve these mysteries.
Now, we actually don't know a ton about Rivera's early life. We do know he definitely wasn't some highly born aristocrat, mostly because the governor never bothered to use the fancy title Don when referring to him. But here's the thing, Rivera had crucial mining knowledge, and that made him the perfect historical detective for this specific mission. So he led this incredibly small, covert reconnaissance party out into the wilderness. We're talking just 7 Spaniards and a Janizaro, which was a detribalized Native American who served as their absolutely essential interpreter. So what actually sparked Rivera's mission? It was a tantalizing physical clue. Indigenous Ute traders who lived north of the New Mexico colony had arrived carrying actual, physical lumps of silver to trade. Think about that for a second. For a Spanish empire that is completely desperate for precious metals, this was the absolute smoking gun. It instantly turned this theoretical search for silver into an urgent, actionable mission. Now, what's really fascinating here is that Rivera actually led 2 totally distinct expeditions in 1765. In June, he set out from Abiquiú, pushed west, and ended up naming several major rivers we still use today, like the San Juan, the Animas, and the Dolores. And during this first trip, he found these incredible signs of ancient mining and old ancestral Pueblo ruins. He even noted that some of these ruined towers were larger than the entire town of Santa Cruz back in New Mexico. But his second expedition in September? Completely different story. This was a hyper-focused, mandate-from-the-governor-type mission to find one specific location, the crucial ford where the Utes crossed the Great Colorado River. Finding that crossing was basically the skeleton key to unlocking the entire region.
Which brings us to part 3, the First Peoples Network, because Rivera definitely wasn't exploring an empty landscape.
Actually, Rivera was stepping into a complex, highly organized, pre-existing world. His success relied heavily on his interactions with the indigenous populations. His group managed to establish cordial relations with the Ute and southern Paiute groups out there. And along the way, Rivera documented this major, pre-existing Aboriginal trail right through western Colorado, a route that later became known as the Navajo-Uncompahgre Trail. He completely relied on these indigenous guides and the intricate network of paths they had already established over centuries.
You see, these indigenous groups, particularly the Utes, were incredibly savvy. They were playing a brilliant geopolitical game of their own. They actively traded slaves and furs with the Spanish over in Taos and Abiquiú, and in return, they acquired guns and other highly valuable goods. Since they wanted to keep those good relations flowing, they engaged with Rivera, but, and this is a big but, they were fiercely protective of their deep territorial secrets. Case in point, on that second expedition, some of the Utes actively opposed helping the Spanish find that crucial Colorado River ford. They totally understood that controlling that river crossing meant controlling the entire region.
Let's move to part 4, the Old Spanish Trail. Because while Rivera never did find those mythical bearded men, his journey changed everything.
His literal footsteps laid the foundation for something massive. Just look at this timeline. It really shows how this early pathfinding built a historical bridge. We start way back with Coronado's search for gold in 1540. Then we jump to our pathfinder, Rivera, in 1765, with his 2 pioneer expeditions. Rivera's precise documentation then paved the way for the famous 1776 expedition by Dominguez and Escalante, who, by the way, were also looking for Teguayo and a route to California. But the real payoff comes later, in 1829, when Armijo leads the first successful commercial caravan. So you see, Rivera was that vital, missing link connecting early exploration to a viable commercial trade network.
Building directly on Rivera's templates, this extraordinary 1,200-mile route between Santa Fe and Los Angeles became known as the Old Spanish Trail. Honestly, I think it's perfectly described by this quote, "The longest, crookedest, most arduous pack mule route in the history of America." I mean, this trail traversed huge mountains, crossed Navajo and Paiute lands, and pushed right through the harsh Mojave Desert. It basically became the absolute commercial lifeline across the Colorado Plateau.
All right, final section, part 5, Modern Archaeological Legacy. Let's look at how this rich history connects directly to us today. These images really show how the centuries just perfectly bridge together. You've got ancient rock art right alongside modern field archaeologists. The exact ancient Puebloid ruins and indigenous artifacts that Rivera was making notes about way back in 1765? Well, those are the exact same things that modern archaeological societies are out there actively working to uncover, document, and protect right now. You literally have university students today out in the field hauling rocks and sifting dirt through screens, learning to identify the very sites Rivera walked right past. And this intense drive to protect these incredibly sensitive resources is very much a massive modern priority. In fact, this dedication recently culminated in the creation of the Bears Ears National Monument in 2016. To put that into perspective, this is a 1.35 million acre designation. It represents a huge effort to safeguard all the ancient sites scattered across this rugged terrain, making sure the history of the First Peoples and those early explorers who followed them isn't just lost to time or vandalism.
So the landscape of the American Southwest isn't just beautiful scenery, it's literally a massive open-air archive of human ambition and survival. Think about this. The next time you're out hiking a trail or exploring a canyon out in this incredible region, stop and ask yourself, are you walking on a path first carved by a savvy Ute trader? Or maybe, just maybe, you're following the footsteps of a Spanish explorer pressing into the unknown, still chasing the ghost of a bearded man?